Judges 6:33. Now all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east came together, and they crossed the Jordan River and encamped in the valley of Jezreel. Underline verse 34. But the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon, and he sounded the trumpet, and the Abiezrites were called out to follow him. So those are the local guys to Gideon when he sounded this trumpet. And he sent messengers all through Manasseh, that's one of the tribes, northern tribes of Israel, and they too were called out to follow him, circle follow. And he sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali. Those are also northern tribes of Israel, where a lot of people live, Israelites lived. And they went up to meet him. Then Gideon said to God, if you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said, behold, I am laying a fleece of wool on the threshing floor, circle threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece alone, and it is dry on all the ground, then I shall know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said. And it was so. When he rose early the next morning and squeezed the fleece, he wrung enough dew from the fleece to fill a bowl with water. Then Gideon said to God, let not your anger burn against me. Let me speak just once more. Please let me test just once more with the fleece. Please let it be dry on the fleece only, and on all the ground let there be dew. And God did so that night. And it was dry on the fleece only, and on all the ground there was dew. Chapter 7, verse 1. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, that's his other name, Jerubbaal, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod, circle spring of Harod. And the camp of the Midian army was north of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me. Now therefore, proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead. Then 22,000 of the people went home, and only 10,000 remained. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people are still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. And any one of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, shall go with you. And any one of whom I say to you, this one shall not go with you, shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, everyone who laps the water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink in the water. And the number of those who lapped up water, putting their hands to their mouths, was 300 men, circle 300 men. But all the rest of the people, 9,700, knelt down to drink water. And the Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 men who lapped, I will save you, circle I will save you, and give the Midianites into your hand, and let all the others go, every man to his own home. So the people took provisions in their hands and their trumpets, and he sent all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, but retained the 300 men. And the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. Have you ever felt like things are impossible in your life? You ever felt like, man, this ain't gonna work out? You ever looked at aspects of your life and go, this is an impossible thing? Could be a relationship, could be a job, could be whatever's happening in your life. You look at it and you go, this is bad. And this badness will probably never get fixed. Have you ever thought in your life, it can't get worse than this? Remember when COVID was supposed to last a month? Oh, it'll be over in like a month. We're just gonna have everybody stay home, COVID will die down, and we'll just go back to our regular lives. Probably April-ish, we should be back to fine. Has there ever been a time in your life where you thought, it can't get worse than this, and it does? Like your boss came to you when COVID started and goes, hey, I just wanna let you know, we're not gonna lay anybody off. Just wanna let you know you got your job. And you go, oh, thank goodness, because man, I got bills to pay. And praise God, like, I'm not going to lose my job, boss. Boss says I'm good. But then COVID goes March, April, May, June, July. You get that phone call. Hey, yeah, I'm going to need you to come in for a second into the office. You get that phone call. And you know basically what that means. You probably ain't getting a raise. Yeah, I just need you to just sit down here real quick. Yeah, we're going to have to let you go. Just want to let you know we're letting you go. And you're like, what are you talking about letting me go? You told me like 3 months ago I was going to have my job like forever. Yeah, well, stuff changes. You realize, wow, I thought it was bad when COVID started, and I thought I could trust and rely on certain people's word, and now all of a sudden, not only am I still in COVID, now I don't have a job. Now how am I going to pay my bills? Now how am I going to stay in my house? Things are already hard the way it is. Just when you think, oh, it won't get worse, then it gets worse. And then when you're here, like, wow, I know it can't get worse now, then it gets worse. I can't get any lower than this. Then you sink down in the mud. Guess what? That's what's happening in Midian's life. I hope this sermon changes your life because it's going to speak directly about why God allows things that go wrong in your life to get worse and how God can use you for his glory in this world, in the midst of disruption. If you got your notes, pull them out. They should be in your bulletin. If you're watching online, at the top of the comment section on Facebook, you can click on a link and it should pop up my notes. Number one is this: God raises up Gideon during disruption. God raises up Gideon during disruption. So right now, we are in disruption. We got health issues, we got financial, we just went through a presidential election. And so we got political things, upheaval going on, people loving it, people not loving it. We got a lot of people just emotionally all over the map. They don't know where to put their hope. Do I put it in the president? Do I put it in the stock market? My job, I don't know if I'm even gonna have my job at the end of this year. Like where's my hope? Where's my stability? Gideon knows how you felt. God raised up Gideon during disruption. Gideon's in chaos in his nation 3,200 years ago. This is 1,000 years before Jesus, 3,200 years from our day. Because of disobedience, the nation of Israel had fallen into serving their enemies, the Midianites. When God was ready to rescue them, though, he raised up a rescuer and asked Gideon to start by tearing down the local cultic altars owned by his own father. So that's a synopsis of last week. If you didn't listen to what I preached last week, go on YouTube and watch it. But basically the synopsis is this: Gideon last week is in a pit beating out wheat, trying to get the seeds to fall out of the husk. He's threshing the wheat in a wine press, which you would never do. It's the lowest part of an area, and all the junk just stays with the seeds. It's not a proper threshing floor. You're doing it in a wine press, which you would never do because he was scared. He's not only scared of people coming and attacking him, he's scared of people taking the little amount of seed he's making. So you see, last week, he's a young man, but he's scared. He's not a warrior. He's not a stud. He doesn't have a lot of hope or thrust to go like, let's do something different. He's stuck in his situation of disruption in his country. There's a huge invading army of killers. The Midianites have just come into his valley, the Jezreel Valley, and now have settled down, and they're starting to eat everything like locusts. And they're going to take all their food, Israelites' food, and take it home with them to their own people. So he's living in chaos. No hope, no security, no nothing. That's last week. God said to him, I'm going to send you on a mission to save Israel. But before I send you to go do a big boy job, I need you to do a little boy job. And last week, your little boy job is, I want you to tear down Dad's altars. Dad had altars to Baal and Asherah. And the reason Israel stumbled all the time in the Old Testament, you see this all the time, they're worshiping Baal again. They're worshiping Asherah, and you go, why would they do that? Those are made up, fictitious gods. Why not just serve the real God? I can tell you why. Because those are fertility gods. I talked about it last week. To gain wealth, you would want your animals to reproduce. If you want to protect that wealth, you and your wife or wives need to have a lot of children. I guess this means a lot of children. A lot of children to protect, ideally sons, to be your small army to protect your wealth. So you need a big family and ideally a bunch of herds, cattle. So your wealth is here and your protection is here. So fertility is huge in the Old Testament, huge. In ancient culture, it was huge, it was everything. That's how you made money, that's how you protected it. So what would I do if I was really scared? I go, man, I need the God of fertility to keep on cranking out calves and keep on cranking out chickens and keep on cranking out kids. This is cranking out kids, I guess. So the reality is that's why they continually worship those gods. They built altars to Baal. They built altars to, they built the poles for Asherah. They were fertility gods that God finally told Gideon, tear down your dad's stuff. Your dad's an Israelite and he's worshiping other false gods. I'm just gonna give you this small little boy mission because I'm gonna send you on a man mission later. And you know what, to Gideon's credit, last week he tore down those altars and God was pleased with him. And so now God's gonna send him to do this job in Judges chapter 6. Seeing that God had protected him on a small scale when he tore down dad's stuff, Gideon then calls Israel, all the men of Israel, northern Israel, to go to war on a large scale. So here's the map, here's the Google map of the area. We will go there when we go to Israel, when we tour Israel. Israel is the skinny nation right there between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. So this is northern Israel, and Ophrah is where Gideon grew up. The Jezreel Valley there is a very fertile, luscious valley full of agriculture, which is why you'd have a lot of animals there. And the Harod Spring is just a couple miles from his hometown, just up out of the valley where the water comes out of the side of the hill. So you can visit it today. And here's a shot of the Jezreel Valley, just to show you kind of how it looks today. So even today in Israel, they farm in the Jezreel Valley. So this is a shot from up on a little crag on a hillside, and down in the valley, I want you to picture this, is a horde, a huge amount of Midianite warriors. Gideon is at the spring of Harod, which is up away from this valley, and he can look down and see this massive army. So that's what's happening in our story today, and that's the location it took place in. Seeing that God had protected him on a small scale, Gideon calls Israel to go to war on a large scale. Being clothed by the Spirit of God, he has gone from hiding in a wine press to calling the nation to war. Look at this. Look at Judges 6, verse 34. This is a really interesting scenario. Look at verse 34. It says, but the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon. I told you to circle clothed. It's the Hebrew word lavash, which means to wrap like clothing. So you get out of the shower, you wrap yourself in a robe. Your kids are shivering outside and you run out to them and you throw a jacket on them or throw a blanket on them. That's the idea of the word. It means to like literally be clothed by God. So I want to lay something out for you. Ready? There should be a difference in your life between when you didn't know God and when you know God. Here's what you can't say. Here's what you cannot say. Before I knew God, I was this kind of woman, or this kind of man, or this kind of student. But after I know God, BC, before Christ, I was this way. But after knowing Jesus, I'm still the same person. When God comes into your life, when that intersection happens, so before I knew God, watch, before I knew Jesus, I had certain natural abilities that God had given me. Athletics, I was moderately intelligent, and I could do some things in the world. But the majority of the stuff I did with my own natural abilities that I had were pretty much me focused. What can these do for me? What money can this make for me? Or how can this serve me? How can my gifts serve me and my interests? But now watch, this is BC, this is before Jesus. But now Jesus comes into my life. Many of these same skills I have now, the natural gifts can be used supernaturally by God to affect people's lives. They can bless people's lives. Rather than it just serving me, now it serves God and other people. So natural gifts can be used supernaturally to serve God and help people. Here's my point, ready? If you're a wife, if you're married, and Jesus is in your heart, your womanhood should be deeply affected by God living in your heart. You should be a different woman knowing Jesus than you are before you knew Jesus. Because Jesus should affect the way you speak, the way you Insta-snap to chat to hip to hop, the things you text, the way you interact with your husband, the love you have and show for your spouse. With Jesus in your heart, it should affect your femininity. You should be more of a woman of God, more of a person that is used by God in the world with how God built you than you were if you didn't know Jesus. So if you're the same person here as you were over here, I would question if you even know God. How can you say God doesn't affect my life? That doesn't even make sense. If God's in your heart, God is at work in you as a woman of God to help you become more of a woman of God. Same thing for men. You can't say to me, I'm a man who didn't know God before and now I know God, but I'm the same guy. I'm the same flirt or the same, I'm married, but I'm still flirting around. I intimidate people. Instead of blessing people, I always am trying to manipulate them or take advantage of them or whatever. If God's in your life, you should be a different man. God should be at work in you to be sensitive to your wife, to be a listener rather than a talker, a teller. You should be a man of God, is my point. So you can't say to me that basically God doesn't really interact in my life, doesn't really make me different. Then I would just say you don't know God. Because it's impossible to have God in your life and you're basically the same either way. So watch, in Gideon's life, Gideon now interacts with God. God comes and interacts. He doesn't know God. He doesn't know the true God. There's Asherah, there's Baal. There's stories about the true God, but nobody even really knows him. All of a sudden, God interacts in Gideon's life. And he goes from weak, wimpy, beating out wheat in a wine press to all of a sudden, God's going to use him for great things. And you know the difference is that God clothes him to go do work for him. It's the empowerment. It's like having a tool that has no power. And you're not plugged into the power. It's a useless tool. It might as well be a rock. But when it has power, man, it does work. It blesses people's lives. It does something. That's the same thing with me and you. If you don't have the power of God, what are you doing in your life? That just means me and you are just living our lives for ourselves. And you couldn't ask for a more empty life than just relentlessly pursuing what you want all the time. That's just relentlessly empty. But man, you serve God with your gifts, and man, God blesses you. And one of the blessings isn't necessarily financial. One of the blessings is you feel the joy of God. Because listen to what I'm saying. The joy of God can't be replicated. And what I mean by that is this. When you sense God using you to bless other people or to bless the world, and you feel like, wow, dude, it mattered that I lived today, it's that feeling. It's the opposite of the empty feeling you have oftentimes. It's that feeling like, dude, it mattered that I was here on the earth. God used me to help somebody. God used me to connect with somebody. But man, there's nothing more empty than just going, what's in it for me all the time? And Gideon here is finally like, I'm going to serve God. And he's clothed with the power of God. So God can sometimes use our natural gifts supernaturally to serve other people and feel the joy of God. And sometimes he gives us a supernatural ability that we didn't have before to bring himself glory. Let me give an example. I've used this story before, but because it's true. Ready? I'm a college student. I'm 20 years old-ish, 21 maybe. I am on a volunteer staff. So like Brian just came up here. I introduced you to Brian. He has a volunteer staff for middle school. People just like you go, I want to serve middle school students, which is a gift of God, right? So he has a volunteer staff, right? I was on a staff like that, Church of the Nazarene on Johnson Street in San Luis Obispo. I was helping our youth pastor. I was his volunteer staff guy, one of many of the staff people. He had decided, I'm going to have all of my staff teach the high school students. Everybody's going to rotate and teach on a Sunday morning. Awesome. Except I hated it. I'm like, I don't want to be in front of people. I'm Norwegian. We like dark rooms with sad songs. Alone by ourselves. Like our version of like being together is being by ourselves in a dark room. Like that's, like Nordic people are not known for their snuggly, like outgoing personalities, right? Like Polynesian cultures or Hawaiian cultures, they're just open and loving, and you just kind of feel the aloha, right? I don't even think there was a word for aloha in Norwegian. It's just like, get out of here. But so those are my people. The Vikings, right? We go chop people up and then row somewhere else, right? That's where I'm from. So he asked me, hey, I want you to teach the high schoolers. I'm like, man, I'd rather not. Like if I wasn't on this stage, you know what I'd be doing at this church? I'd be setting up lights. I'd be playing guitar in the background. I'd be pressing buttons on the computer back there and doing sound. Like that's my wheelhouse, is background stuff. I want to make stuff happen and work. I don't need to be the guy here. I don't care. True story. I had manuscripted my whole lesson for the high school. Literally every word. I was just going to walk up on the stage and go, and then Gideon went to the valley. Look at people. Okay, I did that. Okay. And the Lord said, like I literally was just going to read my manuscript. And I walked up on stage in that youth room, and right as I was walking to the podium, I literally felt the power of God come upon me. It was like literally like the hand of God came upon me. It was literally like being clothed, like somebody just dropped a blanket over me. And because I had done the work, I had studied, I had mastered the text, the minute I opened scripture, it was like I had the gift to teach. And it gave me the ability to take what I had learned and not just regurgitate it like a book report, but actually speak it from God's word into people's lives. Because it was a supernatural gift. Like what you see up here isn't like me going, I went to school and I tried to be awesome. What you see up here is a supernatural miracle, literally every week you come here. So I want to make this clear to you. God may use your natural gifts supernaturally in the world, and sometimes he may go, I'm going to use you for this. And that's what's happening here in Gideon's world. Ready? Here's our principle. There is not a calling without a clothing. There's not a calling without a clothing. There's nothing worse than trying to do God's work in your own flesh. That's when you get burned out. That's when you get like, I hate this. I don't want to do this anymore. It's the worst of all worlds when you try to do God's work without God's Spirit. But man, when you feel God's Spirit in you, it's limitless. Like when I feel the joy of God when I serve people, or like when you serve people, when you sit down with somebody and you're counseling them about godly things or helping somebody to become a better wife or a better husband, and you leave those conversations going, man, that was so energizing because I was used by God to impact somebody else's life. Or working security around here so I don't get shot. Like I appreciate that, right? People walking around going, I'm protecting the people of God with the gifts I've got. Or working with the children, or you get to hold babies and you get to sing songs to them about God or teach them lessons. And you know that mom and dad are in here learning about how to be better parents while you're taking care of their baby. Like it fills you with the joy of God, which can't be replicated. Money doesn't do that. Fame doesn't do that. It has to come from God. While God can do all the work himself, he often raises up people in God's time to do God's work, God's way, in God's power. I tried to put as many gods in there as I could. Ready? Here's our principle. If God presents the war, he prepares believers for the war. Woo! Ready? Everybody listen. If you're thinking about in and out, I want to snap to it. Come back. Ready? Ready? Because we're in war right now. We're in a mental, spiritual, emotional war. People's lives are tore up. They don't know where to find security. If God brings the war to you, which we are in a war right now, just for where people's minds and hearts and hope is at. But if God brings the war, man, he raises up people to get ready for the war. And we're in that right now. And you know what's so sad to me? is there are churches that haven't been open for 9 months. Literally, they haven't opened the doors for 9 months. They gave up in March. And I'm thinking, what are you doing? What are you, like literally what are you doing? You're doing nothing. Like you are built for this moment. Like this is the moment. You know, for the last 50 years when your church has been like, we just love God and love people. And then all of a sudden when it comes down to the point of like, okay, then let's do it. No, the doors are locked. We're just gonna do stuff online because it's easier. By the way, online isn't church. Online, people. Ready? It isn't. Because church is church, which is the gathered people of God. You feel the Spirit of God when the people of God are gathered. We can only do so much inside, but that's why we do stuff outside. Like we do what we can, we don't do nothing. Don't do nothing. Like this, we're in a war. This isn't the time for you to go, I'm just gonna go sit over here and do some online things. What are you talking about? People need to be with the people of God. Give me a stinking break. When our own governor goes to a party with a bunch of other people and doesn't wear a mask. I digress. Ready? Hey, listen, give me a break. You want to pitch this whole thing like everybody's going to die or whatever and like everybody wear masks. Okay, I'm cool with that. Like if that's what science says, let's get on with that. But don't shovel all that stuff out and then show up to a party and like where everybody else is and you're not wearing a mask and you're just wandering around doing whatever. So here's my point, ready? If you can go to Costco, which I just was at Costco with 4 billion other people yesterday, with everybody touching everything else, you're like, well, people wear a mask in Costco. Give me a break. They don't sterilize every mayonnaise jar after a person touches it, okay? If you can go to Costco and you can go to Walmart, you can come to church. So here's my point, ready? We are in a battle for where people find their hope. And if the whole place that has the real hope in the world doesn't open, or people are too scared to come where people are, then you've lost. You've lost. The whole point of a church isn't to have sexy buildings or programs or do whatever. Everybody comes and goes, wow, I love all these buildings. I mean, buildings are great. I hope God gives us a new building so we can actually get our family. Because like our family's like living under tents outside. So we need a new home. But the point is we don't live for a home. We live for the people that are in that home. So whether it's 1,000 people or 10,000 people or 100,000 people, man, there's 250,000 people in this valley that are lost. And it makes me enraged to know that the church, who should be the ones giving hope to people, aren't even open. They're not even trying. And you live in Southern California, son, where we can be outside like 387 days a year. I mean, work it the heck out. All right, moving on. That was free. Hey, ready? Hey, God raises up Gideon during disruption number 1. Number 2, Gideon tests God's calling. So there's gonna be a time in your life where God might raise you up to like go do something. You have to go, like this is a big calling. Like let's make sure that this is God calling me and not me and my own emotions wanting to do this thing. Like let's make sure this is God. And that's what Gideon does because he's putting thousands of men's lives on the line. He's gonna call men to go to war with him and some guys are gonna die. And so he doesn't wanna just go gung-ho on like, this is how I feel. He wants to make sure it's God calling, not just him. Knowing he is severely outnumbered by trained Midianite warriors, and that that he will be responsible for thousands of Israelite lives, he puts a wool skin on the threshing floor to test God's will by controlling the dew. In mercy, God answers his request. So he pulls off a miracle. We get the dew here in our valley. You know, the fog or whatever, the marine layer will come over the hill from the ocean and we'll sit down in here. Or you get the dew will come in different ways and you walk outside and everything's wet. So Gideon, who's an agriculture guy, goes, only God controls nature. And if I lay out a wool skin that is in the same environment as all the rest of the area, it'll all be wet. So if God's true, if Baal and Asherah aren't real, then whatever with them. But if this true God is true, he can control nature and he can answer this thing for me. And God does. And then the next day, Gideon asks him to flip-flop it in case I screwed up. One night it's the wet wool with dry ground, and the other night it's the dry wool with wet ground. So if God pulled that off, he's the true God, and God did it for him. When Gideon asks for the opposite result, God answers again, showing that nothing is impossible for those called by God. God's power can turn the weak into winners, the scared into studs. Where's my studs at? 17 people. Okay, good. Ready? And the measly into mighty. So what's the difference between Gideon beating out the wheat and being scared of his own little shadow and him going, bro, get on your horse, we're going to war. What's the difference between the two of those? Is the power of God. Is the power of God and a man on a mission. That's the only difference. Nothing happened to him like, oh, I got training. I got better training at school. No, you got God. You're willing to do what God wants you to do. Here's a threshing floor. So this is like totally foreign to us because we're in a modern culture. But here's an ancient threshing floor. And you see it, it's circular because what they would do is they would have the cattle or whatever, you'd put all the wheat or the grain or whatever laid in stalks on the ground, and you'd have the cattle walk over them and smash them, or people would stomp them. Because what you want is the head of the grain, the part that you make food out of, is hiding inside of the husk, which is what it grew in, but it can't get out unless you break it out. And so that's why they call it a threshing floor, because you're threshing the wheat, you're thrashing it all around so that the grain falls to the ground and sits on the ground, and then you gather up all the garbage and burn it. So this is a threshing floor. It's an ancient threshing floor. You see it's built on the side of a hill, so when the breeze comes, it blows away all the chaff that guys throw up in the air. It's still done to this day. 2/3 of the world doesn't have technology like America has, so they still have to separate their wheat from the chaff by doing this. Here's a picture of a guy threshing wheat. So this is in modern days, still do it to this day. You have to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff. And so this is what Gideon does, is he puts this wool skin on the threshing floor. So it's right out in the open. If God isn't real or he's not trusting the right God, that thing will not, this test with the wool will not work because it's right out there for everything to affect it. And here's our principle. Ready? God does not call the qualified, but qualifies the called. Woo, look at it. Tweet that. Look at that. God does not call the qualified, but qualifies the called. What does that mean? I hope this encourages you. Look at it with your own eyes. The reason this should encourage you is this. God doesn't wait for you to get your act together to be used by God. God doesn't wait for you to like, oh, once I stop doing this or once I blah, 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 blah. Listen to me. What God wants from you is an open, willing heart to be used by God. And God will fill you with what you need to go do that. In other words, God doesn't wait around for you to go, oh, I am so glad God has me on the team. Like I prepared myself, like even when God looks at me, he goes, wow, like you're amazing. How can I not put you on my team? And you go, I know, I'm so ready. Like, I can't even believe it took you this long to choose me. Like, I'm like a shining, beacon in the dark. How can you not see me? Like, God doesn't wait for us to go get your act together and, gosh, you're kind of a loser. I'll come back when you're a little better, and then we'll figure it out. So just get ready. I'll just circle back. Maybe in a year, you won't be such a loser. Be a less loser by next year. And then maybe we'll do something and you'll be awesome. Nope, God gets right in the dirt with us, right in our loserishness, and takes us from loserishness, which I just made up, into something great. Everybody understand what I'm saying? So here's my point is don't keep on thinking of yourself like, oh, God can't use me, or I got this hang up, or maybe I'll wait till this gets fixed in my life and then I'll go say, no. Repent of your sin, but there isn't a day when all of a sudden you become usable by God. There has to be a day when you go, I want to be used by God. And then God goes to work in your life. It's an openness and a willingness, not a trying to get yourself ready. Which leads us to number 3. Lastly, God tests Gideon's faith. Number 2 was Gideon tests God's calling, and then Gideon goes, okay, I'll put you to the test. God tests Gideon's faith. Gideon gathered 32,000 Israelite men near the Jezreel Valley where the Midianites were camped. After he previously destroyed the altar of Baal and the Asherah pole, which were his dad's, he was mockingly called Jerubbaal, which means let Baal fight against him by Baal worshipers. Now, just before fighting the Midianite army, who also worship Baal and Asherah, God tells Gideon to let the scared men go home, and 22,000 do. You think like this, hey, you know what? What? I'm gonna go do this work for God. Awesome. Let me call all the men. Hey men, you ready to go? You ready to kick these lamos out of our valley? Oh, I'm ready. So he calls all the northern tribes. Men, get out of your tents, grab a sword, let's go to work. And they all come down. Gideon, what are we doing? Oh, here's what we're gonna do. They all gather by the spring. Hey, let's go to war. Let's kick these guys out. Sweet. Then God goes, hey, you know what? I got a thing. Why don't you tell all the scared guys to just go home? That seems kind of weird because everybody's kind of scared before they go into battle, but okay. Gideon goes, hey, I know this isn't gonna affect hardly anybody because everybody here, I mean, maybe 4 or 5 guys are like, I wanna go home, but like this is hardly gonna be anybody. He goes, hey, you know what? If you're scared, why don't you go back to your tent? 2/3 of the people take off. 22,000 out of 32,000 head out to go home. Imagine that mass exodus. He's left with 10,000. He still goes, okay, but at least I got the studs left. Like, I got 10 grand of like some stud guys. And then God goes, take them on down to the river, to this little stream. And guess what? That stream is still there to this day. We can go visit it. Here's what it looks like. This is the Spring of Harod, which is also known as Gideon's Spring. It's a tourist thing right now. You see that guy doing actually literally what I just got done teaching you on. He's scooping the water with his hand to drink it out of his hand with his tongue. This is where that happened. From this spring, it flows downhill into the Jezreel Valley. So this story takes place from that spring and the little stream that comes out of it. So he's got 10,000 guys left, and God goes, that's still too many. Take them to this spring. They go to the spring. The guys that do this, watch this. Those guys drinking like a dog from their hand with their tongue, God goes, oh, save those guys over here. Okay, that's a weird distinction. Everybody else that does this, like normal people, you get down on your knees, put your face in the stream and drink. 9,700 guys do that at this stream. And he goes, oh, how many guys are left? Well, I got 300 guys that drank like a weird dog. And he goes, those are the guys I want. Tell everybody else to go home. And Gideon must have been like, what special skill is going like this gonna be good in the valley? I'm fighting a Midianite killing machine. No, I want the lapping guys. Those are the guys I want. Okay. 9,700 guys, see ya. So now, at a point of story, so you're gonna be amazed how this story ends. Gideon, in our story for today, at the end of today, he's got himself and 300 other guys. Their only skill that they've shown is that they can drink water out of their hand with their tongue. Not like, hey, let's check out who can run a sword, who can throw a javelin, no. What did you do at the stream, bro? I went like this. Okay, you stand over here. You're gonna be my boys. Insane. But that's where we're at in our story. God uses Gideon in disruption, and he's gonna do a miracle. But before we get to the miracle, Gideon's gotta be available. And that's the last thing I leave you. Ready? Our greatest ability is our availability. Our greatest ability is our availability. Our greatest ability is our availability. Be available to do the work of God. Ladies, you should be a better wife, a better mom, a better young woman of God if you're single or whatever. Wherever you find yourself, you should be better because you have the Spirit of God in your life as a woman than you were if you didn't have God in your life. Men, you should be a better husband, a better worker, a better leader of your home, a better parent. You should be better because God's in your life. The Spirit of God should make you a better man. The Spirit of God should make you a better woman. Even in chaos, we can live godly lives.